All right. So let's continue with the program at the first day of game days. Thanks to the activity of Slovak Game Developers Association, we monitor the games industry in our small country. And based on the research that is done annually, we know that we have 38 companies involved in games industry. This trend is rising, and the numbers are getting bigger and bigger every single year. And right now, those companies are employing nearly 530 people. And one of the most productive studios, and actually one of the most skilled, operating here in Slovakia is Games Farm, specializing in action RPG games. They are based in the city of Košice, and their new title will be developed in cooperation on a huge heroic IP owned by Funcom. I'm not going to give it away, but you can imagine it's Conan. It is my pleasure to invite Peter Nagy, CEO of Games Farm, to the stage to tell us more about designing premium games. So please welcome Peter.
Hi everybody, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I'm Peter Nagy. I'm the CEO and creative director of the Games Farm. As Pavel already said, I'm one of the oldest, most experienced guys, including also oldest, but also one of the most experienced guys in Slovakia. We did like more than 15 years in the business. We have more than 20 games released, last of which were Shadows Awakening and Vikings Wars of Midgard, all which were action RPGs. Before we did like a lot of different other games as well, different genres. But now we are focusing on the RPG genre, and we hope to do that also in the future. So we are working together with Pavel and a few other guys in Slovakian Game Developer Association. We are working now in Games Farm as a development company, and I also founded a few years ago a company called Grindstone. It's also Košice based, but it's more kind of like production publishing company. It's still starting. Our first game was Helmut the Badass from Hell, which we released last year, and it's coming out this year on the consoles as well. We are discussing also the mobile game, but we will see. Last year I founded Game Dev Košice. It's a small group for the development companies based in Košice. And we are also doing like game dev meetups in Košice, similar to what is being held in Bratislava. Last year we did the first year of the Game Days Košice, so it's kind of similar event than the one we are currently attending here in Trnava, and hopefully this year we will be having the second year of the Game Days Košice in November. So you are all invited, and I will see you there. So. I'm doing some kind of education activities in the Košice area, so trying to help the school to implement the game development courses so that there is a certain increase in the active developers populations, which is still like quite low considering the size of the Slovakia, and there are still a lot of space to grow up. So I hope you will join our big family and growing family. Well, I try to also speak and share my experience, which we collected over the years, to the people who didn't have this kind of like opportunity and who have been born a little bit younger. So, and my like kind of philosophy is like kind of inverse procrastination theory. So I think that if you have something which you can do tomorrow and you want to do it tomorrow, you can do it also today, and then tomorrow you can do something else. I mean, like it's a very productive thing, and you can do a lot of things with it. So I definitely advise you to implement it into your workflow. So part of that, these are the games which we did like over the last 15 years. You can see that there are plenty of genres, plenty of different titles. Our main focus now, as I said before, is RPG games. We want to do a better and better, higher quality games. Before we did Air Conflict series, we did some kind of like hunting games, like games for children, like really plenty of different kind of games and genres. We are focusing on the premium production only, so we are not really doing free-to-play games. It's really like a lot of things are similar, but the kind of main loop is different thinking, so which we are focusing really on this premium only stuff, and we want to do something better. So what I'm here for, I want to tell you something about the game design. I'm not going to go that much into the specific because it all comes up from the top, in my opinion. And I have to say that really the game design is one of the most difficult part of the game development, even though it looks perhaps very easy at the first glance. So really what fits to the game design is like Sir Winston Churchill said a lot of years ago, blood and toil and tears and sweat. So it's really difficult, not because it's so difficult to have the ideas. We all have the ideas, of course, which we can like seemingly easily to transfer into the game development. The problem is the responsibility. The responsibility coming from the game design is like the most important part, and it's the biggest one, because if you fail with the game design, everything else fails as well. So the main responsibility for the success of the game is on the game design. So my speak today here is split into 3 parts. So the first part is like something about the game design. I'm speaking more on the top level, so it's not really like I'm not going that much into the specific kind of features, as you will see, but rather like connection between the business and game design. So really this kind of high-level things, which are very important because we see daily that there are a lot of games, good games coming out, and they fail. And they fail miserably, and I see that like happening really very often with good games, even coming from whatever, like Slovakia, all around. But it's not only specific to the like Slovakia. It happens all around the world. There are a lot of products out there, and really a lot of good products, but they fail in connecting the business and connecting the game design. And this is the most essential thing, which if you want to succeed, then you have to think not from the point of idea, but you have to think a little bit more from the business first, and then do the game design after. So we will speak a little bit about how to design a specific game, and then I will give you a little bit like insight how we implemented this kind of like theory into the practice with our last game, Shadows Awakening. So if you are still thinking about the game design and you didn't left, so I think you still might be considering it. So what is the game design? It usually like says that it's just like idea, it's good idea, and you can be a good game designer. That's like often what I'm getting, that I have such a great idea about the next great game, but that's like kind of, it's not really enough. So unfortunately, would be very nice if it would work this way, but the problem is that you need to implement these ideas, and that's the key thing, because not all the ideas are suitable for the implementation, or maybe your team is not suitable to implement your idea into the practice. So you can fail on all those kind of levels. So what you need to think is like really adjust your ideas to what you are capable of doing. In Slovakia, it's like the game design is really like the most important part of the game development. Unfortunately, in Slovakia, there are very few senior game designers. It's really the alpha and omega, but the problem is like there are the people here, they just don't have enough opportunities to collect the experience. And that's the biggest drawback, in my opinion, why the games coming out from here, they are failing often, very often. The second point is like there is also like missing, of course, the business connection and the network required to place your product and give it out to the market or sell it to your partners. But we are not going to talk about this today. We are talking about the game design. So really the insufficient experience is the biggest problem which I can see in the game design here. So why is that? So the problem with the game design is that it really requires various skill sets, and it really depends on your kind of project, like what is your required skill set. So if depending on your kind of projects, usually it's like you all have like different kind of visions about your projects. You think about, I don't know, one of you may think about Tycoon, one of you may think about action combat. And as you can see, like it really requires this kind of specific skill sets to do this kind of things right. You know, so I mean, there are plenty of different genres. So you can see like each of those, like sport games, you need different kind of skill sets. Then, for example, I cannot design a right good sport game because I just don't know the sport games, you know, and I don't play it. And it's really depends on each game designer what they can do and what they can do right. That's the most important thing. So about that, maybe there is, of course, certain connecting skill sets which is required by all and every game designer out there. So I don't know if you know Lucifer, maybe some of you do. So it's really about understanding players' desires. And if you have seen Lucifer's series, it's the main question he's giving to all the suspects. So what you need to do as a game designer, you need to understand their desires and fulfill them. Then only if you understand it, then you can design the product and make it right for them. And to do that, you will really need to have some kind of like abstract thinking to get something somehow inside the head of your players and try to think how they will play the game and what they are expecting and what they are really looking forward. So a part of that, you also need to understand the entire development process, because this is like very important thing. You can come up with a great idea which is not realistically implementable within the scope of the development. So you have to like understand algorithmic things, you have to think in math, you have to think in the production capacities. And this only can happen if you like really know all the stuff from the beginning to the end. And that's the reason, maybe you have heard a lot of times, that's why there are a lot of game designers coming out of the QA. So quality assurance, they are coming in touch with all the departments in the game development, and that's the reason why there are a lot of game designers coming out of the QA departments, because they know all the aspects of the game and they can think from the above, and they can get a lot better like vision and understand the entire development process of every single idea. So that's the most important part when thinking about the ideas. And that's also the reason why, if you want to be a good game designer, maybe it's a good way to start in a QA departments of some companies. So all the other departments, unfortunately, they have like inherently like much more restricted point of view. So I know a lot of programmers, for example, also in our company, or the artists, but their ideas are really coming out of their like really kind of limited and restricted point of view of their proficiency. So what is it that the player desires? Like that would be the question which would Lucifer ask. And it's really about the emotions which you want to give to all the players which you want to approach. So if you want to address certain kind of audience, they are expecting some kind of emotions. And there are a lot of like, the most common is like they want to be satisfied, of course. They want to be happy because they are playing your games. How to do it? I mean, like, it sounds easy, but then you have to like prevent the frustrations. You have to give them kind of challenge first, and then you have to they have to get some kind of like satisfaction. So this is like difficulty curve which you should try to implement into your products as much as you can. It's really, as you can see, there is like really build up the challenge. Then, for example, here is the boss fights, and then drop down the challenge, and then escalate again, and escalate again, and escalate again, and repeat this pattern. And you can see that very, very well implemented, for example, in Candy Crush. It's really like doing across a few levels. The difficulty curve increases, and then it drops, and it gives you the satisfaction that you have overcome so good, so difficult level, and then suddenly the difficulty drops, which brings you to think that you are so great because you like overcome this difficult challenge, and then the difficulty decreases suddenly, and then you think like, oh, I learned how to do it very well, and even though the difficulty drops, you don't realize it as a player, but you are happy how great you are. So that's very satisfying for a lot of players. Of course, there are a lot of other players which likes frustration, for example, like Dark Souls, if you have played. That is really all about the frustration and challenge. But there is also the same pattern, of course. All the time they are building up. There is again the boss fight coming, and then the difficulty drops. So it's really built along the same patterns, game design. So what you need to really do and consider all across your ideas is production limits. Because if you are going to develop any game, you are always going to work with limited resources. And of course, these limited resources, it is also what limits you in your ideas. And it's much better to have one idea implemented well than have 5 ideas implemented badly. So that's really, you have to restrain yourself from the potential problems with the production. You will hit the production limits anyway, because it happens. I think we extended every single one of the developments which we did by a certain margin. But that's something, if you have a clever partner or publisher or whoever is going to invest you, they also have certain kind of like reserve allocated for your time frame and budget. So think about the game is only the ideas which can be implemented that counts. So that's why you always need to take into the account always the production limits which your team has. Now, obviously there are a lot of I have only experience in premium game design, so I cannot really tell you much about the freemium, but in my understanding, the basic framework is similar. It's just the key difference. Premium is like experience-driven development, which means like we try to estimate what the players would want. It's like kind of like really requires a certain set of experience so that you can estimate it right. And the freemium, it's data-driven, so they just test it and get the data, they analyze the data, and they build the game around the data. So it's kind of different approach. They still have the, of course, game design things and stuff, but the key idea, the game design origin is coming from different angles. So let's design some game, okay? So before you do the game design, so what you should consider. So first, as I mentioned, team skills. That's really the most essential thing. If you are a team of the 5 programmers and you don't have artists, you are obviously not going to do an RPG or any kind of like heavy adventure, which is like heavy art-driven game. So you cannot do that. So you are going to do, I don't know, text game, whatever. I mean, I kind of like overrate, but something like that. So you really have to adjust everything which you are doing to your skills. And that's something which is very often like completely missed by starting teams, is like make a viable business case. And that's like, I cannot emphasize how important this is, because if you come out with something which you cannot sell, like nobody will give you money for it. And you need the money to build up the game because you cannot do it for free. So this is the angle which it's absolutely essential. So you have to find your place on the market before you even start the development. This connection of the business and game design is really requires certain experience and stuff, but try to think out of the box, because I know that you don't have experience and you don't have the business developer behind you most likely, but try to think out of your out of your horizon and see beyond it. So, do you have the resources to complete the development? That's very important, because obviously without the resources you will not be able to complete it. So if you don't have the resources, you don't have the money, then how much do you need? And if you have the number, then you can think how much you need and how can you get it. So those are all the ideas which you have to think and consider even before starting. It's not really working that I will make something and I will get some money from it afterwards. It just doesn't work like that. And the people, even if it would work, then you are getting yourself into very, very vulnerable position, because you are not prepared for the people who will give you the right questions, and you will not be able to answer them. And that means you will not be able to get the money from them, and you will have to accept the money on a bad conditions, and you are going to waste your time for somebody else. So that's how it works. Unfortunately, it's still the business. There can be a lot of money behind it, but it's still, in the first place, it's business, unless you are really well suited and you have the full packet, which is not really usually happening. So really, the game development is the team development thing. So you cannot do it alone. You need to find people around you who will help you, who will work with you on each of your vision, on each of your product, on each of your visions and ideas. So you really need to design on the strengths of your team and utilize the strengths of your team in the most efficient way. That's the only way how you can succeed on the market. So, how competitive is the market for the product? That's a very important question. Can you put the product on the market successfully? That's another very important question which you need to ask yourself. How can you support the game after the release? That's really something which you can see all around. It's not anymore the game as product. It's the game as service, which is everybody looking for. Because nobody wants to release the product and forget it. Everybody wants to release the product, support it, and earn the money on it. Because after the game is released, it has already certain awareness, and you can add the content for much cheaper price and still earn a good chunk of money. So it reduces the investment risks. How much it will cost you to develop such a competitive product? Obviously, you need to have the budget. You need to know how much it will cost you. The important question, obviously, who is your player? That's you need to identify your audience and how you can reach them. So you can use mobile platforms, you can use consoles, you can use PC or whatever, any other platforms which are coming out in a near future. But still, it requires that the game is aligned with the platform. So this is really, if you are going to do a super casual, you are not going to do, obviously, console game. It's not going to work. So another question, is the audience large enough to justify the investment which you estimated? Because if you have too many ideas, it will require too much resources, and that means that you will have to sell a lot of units, and it means the investor or publisher or you may not recoup your investments. So still, the audience has to be large enough. How to market the game? And how to successfully put the product on the market. This you may not need this kind of information, but if you have it, you are in a better position because you can show it already to your partners, and it shows that you are prepared, and it shows that you know where you are going and what you want to do. So really it's very good if you think about these questions first, so you can build up a viable business case which you can present to the people who knows and who have the money, and they can give it to you money, but only if they see that you understand what you are doing and they understand how you want to monetize and eventually return the money to them. That's the very important thing. So executive summary is something which defines your game, and that's really something which every game design document should more or less start with. So what should it contain? What's the game? You can refer to other games so that you can maybe better give an impression about what's your game going to look like. What are the differences from the competitors and why the difference is better? Because different doesn't always mean better, obviously. It can be much worse. So the business model, how you want to earn the money on it. Very important question, obviously. How long and how much do you need to complete the development? So how long is obvious question, because it means that also how much. So if there is any investor behind it, they will increase that by 20, 30, 50% if you are not experienced, and you may still run over that, which would be like not really a best start point for the future cooperation. Your key team members. This is something which gives you a credit. If the better experience you have, the more experienced team members you have, the better chances you have to succeed. It's really good if sometimes even at least one or two guys have already some experience in your team. So this is something which you can think about. And what do you need to make the game succeed? And if it will succeed, how will be the success looking like in terms of numbers, compared to other similar games on the market, which gives them at least some kind of like idea that what they can earn back on their investments. So let's get to the game design and get rid of the business things. So what you need to think about is, like, if you want to create your game and develop it, unique selling points. This is something which is not really like present in other games on the market. It often is confused with the key features, which is something which defines your game but can be present also in other games. The problem with the unique selling points, if you have too many, it becomes unpredictable product. So this could really easily happen because you are so creative, you got so great ideas, and you are going to create a really unique product. But how can I, as a business developer, manager, whatever, investor, estimate the potential of your product? I cannot, because there is nothing like that on the market. So there is no way to predict it, which makes your great, unique product very risky for everybody. I mean, there are publishers who are focusing on the kind of like unique things and stuff, but they usually don't work with the big budgets. They are potentially trying to reduce the risks. Obviously, they can shoot and it can succeed. It doesn't mean that it cannot. It's just like risky business case. So be very careful about these unique things. Key features, on the other hand, is something which is like commonly present in other games as well, and you can define your game by the key pillars, key game pillars. So you will also need to have all these key features. I usually do first bullet points, so that maybe there is just one page of the unique selling points, key features, and just one line for every one of these kind of key features, and then do another chapter where I detailedly explain every one feature which is there and why it's important and how it is incorporated in this kind of game design which we are offering. Obviously, the development timeline, this is very important. Put it on the end, and after the release, put there also some kind of like place for the post-development, post-release plans, so that you can have the DLCs. It shows that you take care about your product, and it means you are serious with it. So it increases your credibility. Obviously, the budget. Sometimes it really depends. I'm, for example, not putting this into the game design documents. I usually communicate different kind of budgets to different partners because I know how much they can afford. I mean, it's not really fair, of course, very fair practice. But on the other hand, there are companies which cannot pay you that much, but they, on the other hand, can give you some different kind of benefits, which still can make their offer, even though they will give you a smaller amount of money, but they can be still competitive against other companies which can give you more money, but on the other hand, they will lack some other benefits. So now let's design Shadows Awakening, okay? I will just briefly tell you how we dealt with some kind of like things. So what was the situation like several years ago when we designed Shadows Awakening? So it was 2015. We have been in the situation where there was already one part of the game released as a Shadows Heretic Kingdoms Book 1. The publisher went bankrupt, and we had certain like problems with the rights. Eventually, we were able to acquire them back and buy them back. We had almost 100,000 people on the wish list on Steam, which is quite decent numbers, but we will get to that later on. The problem was the sales predictions. Obviously, this product, there was certain awareness about the product. We had a decent amount of the wish list. We had certain amount of the sales, which were like based on the data from Steam Spy. It was 20 to 50,000 units. And so let's try to applicate all the kind of like things which we spoke about earlier. So the team skills, obviously, this was like we already had experience with the RPGs. We did the book 1, then we did the Vikings Walls of Midgard, and obviously the next RPG project would be no-brainer. So that was not really a complicated thing. So check, could be good. So business case. Now that's very difficult because this situation is very complicated. Okay. We already had a part of the game released as a book 1, which is like not the best starting point if you want to release the game. All your partners will like make you like if you are completely crazy that you want to release a new game which contains a part of which was already part of the release. So crazy. Negative perception of the bankruptcy. Obviously, the book 2 was supposed to be released in 2015. It never happened. The bankruptcy, it means okay, it's fucked up product or fucked up partner. It doesn't matter for the players. They don't see the difference whether this was our fault or whose fault was it. So it was still we were still part of it, and the product was part of it. So it's a fail. Impossible to predict the market behavior and the product's potential. That was the direct result of that kind of untransparent situation. We had the publisher made the promise that the book 2 will be delivered for free. So now the situation was we either deliver it for free and lose the money, or we will charge for it and receive the negative backlash from the audience because they were promised something which was never kept. So it's something like there is no good solution for that kind of thing. We obviously have seen that there is a certain market awareness and that there is already certain market for the people. We had 100,000 people on the wish list. We had certain sales, which means like, I don't know, let's be very optimistic, 150,000 people know about the game and they like it. But the wish list is very tricky, obviously, because why the people wish list your game? Because if they would be so convinced about your game, they would buy it, but they don't. So it means they are waiting for sales, but means like how much they are willing to pay for your game. It could be €5, it could be €1, it could be 50% of the price. You don't know that. It also means you have to still convert them. The conversion will take some time, to take some money. You have to promote your game. So that's very, very difficult to evaluate, like how to convert the people from the wish list. But overall, the people liked the idea. So what we knew was that the game original idea was good. That was something which we were so happy about, of course. But still, there was a lot of work to make it right. And what we discussed, or basically were forced to do, is like we were forced to do post-release support to make 2 new heroes to generate some kind of like additional post-launch awareness. That was not that great plan, in my opinion, but it was like kind of requested and conditional from the publisher to get something more and more and more. Obviously, the publisher will always want more, so that's something you get used to it. So I cannot disclose how much we got the money, how much budget we got, but the minimum guarantee, which means like the publisher will pay you some minimum guarantee for the development, was not enough to cover the entire development budget costs which we had with the development of the game. We already had, obviously, the target audience clearly defined. It was the players on the Steam. We were going to release on Xbox, PlayStation. The RPG players were obviously the target. Now, the big question, which more or less couldn't be answered, was like if the audience is enough to justify the development costs. Because of all those kind of like confusing things and the situation, this is something which I can say now that more or less it was perhaps balanced, but it's not something which we are going to earn the big money from. We are most likely not ever going to see any money out of it. So the marketing, the division from Calypso, which was our publishing partner, was like, okay, we'll do the same as we did with Vikings. With Vikings, it worked a little bit quite okay-ish. There were a lot of different other problems, but I'm not going to dig their direction. So the tactical plan to approach was like utilize the existing audience, build upon the failure, and try to turn it into the success. Right, very simple. Sounds like it. So how would the executive summary look like? So Shadows Awakening is a real-time tactical RPG where you take control of a demon living in a parallel dimension, which you can enter our reality by embodying souls of the consumed dead heroes. It's more or less one sentence, which kind of defines the vision of the game. More or less every word there is like very important because it really gives a very short summary about the game vision. It obviously doesn't need to be one sentence, it can be more, but it's very good if you can define your game by one sentence, at least at the beginning. So, the differences between other players, other competitive products, you were able to play as Demon, you could have an entire party in just a single character, which has a lot of implications in terms of like consoles, because if you know, then on the consoles it's a little bit more confusing to control the entire party, but if there is a party in one character, it's much easier to control. We had certain synergical tactical skills combinations in the combat, so this was very like something which we were able to market. The product was placed as a premium product for 39 euros, and originally we wanted to launch on Q2 2018 with the DLCs coming after. We again slipped the development by more or less 2 or 3 months. I think we released in August, so the key team members, it was the same team as Vikings, so this was fine. So why did we more or less make Shadows Awakening? Because it's a good game with a lot of potential, which was obviously proved by all the points, but it was bad business case to say so nicely. In my opinion, it was like very bad business case, and still I'm saying it very nicely, because there were too many unpredictable factors. We are quite lucky that Calypso, they were willing to give us at least a certain amount of budget, because to be honest, I am not sure if I would be willing to do so if I would be on their side, because this kind of like opportunity was, even though the game has a lot of potential, it doesn't mean that it can succeed on the market and return the money. So that's the reason why we more or less got lot less money than we would get for a new game if we would do the same game, but a different one. So we had to pay a lot of money on the top to accomplish the product. And the question is like why we did it. Alright. So there are a lot of we have to consider, like we didn't consider it just from the short-term perspective in terms of earning the money. We took, I call it meta reasons, and that's like I more or less shot for the long run. So I wanted to build up audience. I wanted to build a brand, which is a Heretic Kingdoms, which was heavily damaged by the product, which was never released. So this is something which we would have very lot of problems to fix. And if we ever decide to go to Heretic Kingdoms again, it would be very, very difficult. And obviously, I was also thinking that the company positioning would be much better because if we are able to complete the product, which failed that kind of miserably, and we still keep our promises and we deliver and we develop, it puts us into a much better position when we will be talking with the new partners. So it's kind of like a long-run decision where we had to sacrifice short-term benefits in exchange for improving our position on the market. So as a result, we lost some kind of money. It's a six-digit figure on the development. We don't have that kind of like sales, so I don't think we'll ever see any money out of the Shadows Awakening, anything in the future. It's kind of like if you compare Shadows Heretic Kingdoms, which was book 1 only, and Shadows Awakening, they both sold like 20 to 50,000 units on Steam Spies. I obviously cannot disclose any details, but those are the public figures, so you can get access to that on the Steam Spy. The game itself, it improved a lot. So we got now 77%, but original one has only 74%. And the user score, it's much more obvious. We have 76% instead of 62%, which is a significant improvement from the point of players. So more or less what we can say that the game is objectively better, but the revenues, they didn't increase that much. And the meta result is like, for me, this was a success because we signed up the new game because of this kind of improved positioning of the product, improved the positioning of the company with Funcom, which I consider like a very solid partner, at least in the moment, and I hope it will stay this way. So we will be working on the new product for the next 2 years, and that's more or less from my side. So I hope I didn't bore you to death. And now it's time for the questions. I will be very happy to answer them.
So if you, okay, so the question is there, just raise your hand and ask.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, the development process of this kind of big games, it's very expensive. So, I mean, we are talking of possibly 100 million euros on this particular product, which means like any extension, it's not only about the increase of the development cost itself, but it also delays the revenues. And there could be like possible meta reasons why they decided to launch it anyway, because they, like for example, their financial year, they need to improve it for the investors. So they have to launch the product regardless of the quality, and that often happens. Or they say like, okay, the team would need that kind of like time to fix it, that it just doesn't make sense. So they rather like launch it anyway, take the shit storm, and then like either improve it later if it proves good, or they just leave it be. There are really just a few companies which do it other way around. So it's like Red Dead Redemption 2, obviously, but they spent like, I don't know how many years, but it was a lot longer than most of the development cycles, and the resources which they spent, it will be like more than 100,000 and significantly more than 100 million euros. So those figures are, there could be a lot of background business decisions which are driving this kind of decisions, and it not necessarily has to reflect anything with the game, if you see what I mean. No, well, I think it's 2K, so it's the kind of subsidiary. So. Yeah, well, like I said, it's difficult to see in the background, like what the figures and what are the reasons to do that. But often you have the deals which are arranged years in ahead. So I mean, there is like if you have distribution deals that you have to supply the product latest at this point, otherwise you will pay, I don't know what kind of penalty, which could be millions and millions. So it's really, this is a problem with the retail market, and that you have to establish the distribution coverage. And this distribution coverage is cannot be handled from month to month. It happens in years advance. And especially if you are going for the prime time, like Christmas seasons, it really means like you have to have your slot to succeed. You can get much better coverage, you can get much better revenues out of it, but you have to keep the time. And if you don't, you will pay dearly for it. And it doesn't need to be only the development costs. Also, you have to consider the marketing campaigns for this kind of games. It's usually also 100 million, another on the top. And if they should prolong this kind of like marketing campaign longer, it means like the effect will decrease and the costs will increase. So again, there are a lot of like background business decisions which may drive this, let's put it anyway, out of the market. Anyone else? Yeah, well, I think it's great for the developers if you have a successful game. The problem is like it's really two double-edged thing. So, if you are working already several years on the product and you have to support it for several years, a lot of people in the development team, they are getting annoyed because you are still working on the same product. On the other hand, from the business perspective, it's a great kind of like revenue stream which you can sustainably grow up, and it will always like increase also the popularity and the revenues driving from the original game. So it's like building up something which grows up organically over this kind of like post-launch support and service. So it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense in business perspective. It has certain backlash, but I think if you do it like wisely and you use this kind of like DLCs and service content as a training ground for the new people which are coming into your company, I think that could work very well. That's my opinion. Heretic 3. 3, sorry. In the moment there is not really like anything in the work. We have certain concepts which we are like exploring, but we will see. I mean, there is nothing which I would be able to share because it's really nothing. Not that I don't want to. I would be very happy to share if I have something, but it's just like we are still just thinking about the ideas and evaluating which concept may be the best, perhaps. Yeah, well, I think what you need to do is like you should really do a small thing. Start small and do it well. And that's, I think, the best thing. Don't think you are going to make the biggest, best game ever, which it's not going to happen. But if you are going to create small, focused vertical slice where you will, present like 2 great features, and you will show it how it works. 1 level, that's enough. You just don't need anything more. You need 1 level which works, which shows you 10 minutes of gameplay, 15 minutes of gameplay. You don't really need anything more. It just has to be polished. It has to be nicely done, and it will show your expertise. It will show your approach and your vision. That's all you need. I mean, don't overdo it. Better, smaller thing, made done well. And then, well, that's that's a difficult question, because in my opinion, today the market is so much saturated that if you just launch the game, you will fail. So if you go to early access, you will fail. That's like most of the people just will do it, because it's sometimes you just don't have time maybe to go out and look for the partners, but that's what you should do. Like, go out to the conferences, try to build up the connections, show it to the other people from the business who give you their impressions. They can introduce you to other people who might be looking for this kind of game. That's really something. The most important thing is build up the connections, because there is often some companies which are looking for the product, and you might be possibly good fit for them. And even if they are not currently looking for the product, you establish the connection with them, and they might be looking for the product in 6 months or 1 year, and they just oh, we have seen them, so let's try to talk with them. So this is something it's long run, but if you want to stay in the business, you have to think in the long run. So go out, network, present your game, collect the feedbacks, and try to showcase the game wherever you got. There are every conference they have showcase things where there are coming people from the business, and they even though they will not want your product, they will give you feedbacks, and they will maybe tell you that it's sorry, this product is just complete fail. It may happen, but you are going to save you. It will save you additional, I don't know, several years, which you would be spending development. And you maybe, if you will be clever enough, you will accept that. And if you will be stubborn enough, then you will say hey, I don't care. I will finish my product anyway. But at least you will have some feedback. Okay. It's again now that the market is so saturated, it's difficult to get the awareness. The problem, I mean, you can do it, the Kickstarter, but what you need to do is support it with the full marketing campaign to get and build up the awareness about your Kickstarter campaign. So it kind of it can be part of your marketing activities, and I would it would be great thing to do. For example, if we develop a game, I know that I'm going to finish it anyway, and this Kickstarter campaign is just my test run to kind of build up awareness, collect some feedbacks, build up the first community, and do it as a first step. So this is something, for example, the guys from Sacred Fire, they did. They did a Kickstarter, successful Kickstarter. They didn't ask for that much of money because they don't want to fail. Obviously, you need to have the successful Kickstarter campaign to be so that it can be used as a marketing tool. But then they already had the community. They can use this community as a part of their presentation to the producers, to the publishers, and it gives them a completely different image. So it really improves their position. But you cannot do it that you are just going to make a Kickstarter campaign. It really requires full marketing campaign, so it's going to cost you money, it's going to cost you a lot of time. So this is something which you have to consider. Okay, so I will be around here for the next 2 days, so if you have any further questions, I will be happy to talk with you anytime. So thank you again.